The courtroom was packed to the brim. Cameras flashed relentlessly, every lens aimed at the two figures standing across from each other, Denzel, calm yet unyielding, and Trump, restless, his fists pressing against the podium as if force alone could silence the storm around him. This wasn't just a legal hearing, it was a national reckoning. When the judge's gavel struck, a hush fell. Denzel inhaled slowly, his voice cutting through the tension like steel. This is not about a chain of command. This is about whether power serves the people, or crushes them. The National Guard was never meant to muzzle citizens. It was meant to protect them. And, Mr. Trump, you crossed that line. The words landed like thunder. Trump lurched forward, his voice booming, defiance dripping from every syllable. Wrong. I acted to defend America. The protests were spiraling out of control. My duty was to restore order. Denzel didn't flinch. His reply came sharp, unwavering. Order? Order built on silencing voices isn't order at all, it's tyranny. You don't defend America by turning its streets into battlefields. The true chaos begins when a leader wages war on his own people. For a moment, the air itself seemed to freeze. Every ear strained, every heartbeat echoed. And then, faintly at first, the chants of the crowd outside seeped into the chamber, voices demanding truth, freedom, and accountability. The courtroom walls trembled, as though history itself was leaning in to listen. Trump's jaw tightened as the chants from outside grew louder, echoing like a drumbeat of resistance. He pointed a finger at Denzel, his voice rising, desperate to reclaim control. You think you can stand there and lecture me? I'm the one who held this country together when radicals wanted to tear it apart. The Guard did what had to be done. History will vindicate me. Denzel leaned forward, his hands gripping a stack of documents, his gaze never wavering. He raised them high so the entire courtroom could see. History doesn't bend to power, it bends to truth. These are the orders, signed under your watch, deploying armed force against unarmed civilians. Tear gas, rubber bullets, armored vehicles against kids holding signs. This isn't defense, it's suppression. And America will not forget. The silence that followed was electric, heavy with the weight of accountability. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every twitch on Trump's face. He looked cornered, his usual bravado cracking as sweat glistened on his brow. Then Denzel's voice lowered, steady and deliberate, almost like a verdict. When leaders turn weapons on their own people, they don't protect a nation, they betray it. The words hit harder than any gavel. A murmur swept through the courtroom, then applause broke out in waves, defying the judge's calls for order. Trump slammed his palm on the table, his fury on full display, but the roar of the crowd outside only grew stronger. For the first time, the balance of power felt reversed, not in the hands of the man at the podium, but in the voices rising beyond the walls, fueled by truth and carried by Denzel's defiance. The judge's gavel struck wood again and again, but the rising storm inside the courtroom could not be silenced. Reporters scrambled to type, cameras flashed relentlessly, and the sound of chants outside, "No justice, no peace," thundered through the walls like an anthem. Trump pushed back his chair, standing abruptly, his face red with fury. He jabbed a finger in Denzel's direction. "You're grandstanding for the cameras. You think Hollywood scripts can rewrite reality? I made choices to defend America from chaos. I'd do it again tomorrow." Denzel didn't flinch. He stood as well, holding the documents higher, his voice firm and cutting through the noise like a blade. "This isn't a script, Mr. Trump. These are the receipts of power abused, signed by your hand. This is not order. This is fear, dressed up as patriotism. And you used it not to defend America, but to silence her people." A sharp gasp rippled through the gallery. Families of protesters, veterans, and students filled the benches, their eyes fixed on the confrontation. A mother in the front row clutched a photo of her son, a young man injured during one of the Guard deployments. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Finally, someone said it." Trump's voice cracked as he tried to regain footing. They were threats. Dangerous agitators. You weren't there when bricks flew through windows. Denzel stepped forward, his tone sharper now, filled with a righteous edge. I was there. I walked those streets with them. They carried signs, not guns. Their voices were their weapons, and you answered with soldiers. That's not strength, it's cowardice. The room erupted. Applause, shouts of agreement, fists raised high. Trump's protest was drowned out by the roar, his words swallowed in the tide of defiance. And in that moment, as the chants outside synchronized with the echoes inside, the courtroom transformed into something bigger than law. It became the stage for America's reckoning. Outside the courthouse, the scene had grown into a spectacle that no one in America could ignore. Giant screens broadcast the live feed, and across cities, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, crowds gathered in plazas, bars, and college campuses to watch the showdown unfold. The air was electric, as if the nation itself was holding its breath. Chants surged from the crowd, "We are the people," and "No more fear." The sound carried for blocks, so loud that it vibrated through the courtroom windows. Inside, the judge tried to restore order, but the moment had already slipped beyond the gavel's control. Journalists swarmed the courthouse steps, narrating history in real time. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing is no longer a legal hearing. It's a battle for the soul of America, one anchor declared breathlessly. Back in the chamber, Trump's shoulders slumped. He scanned the benches, expecting applause, but found only piercing stares, people who had lost children, homes, and futures in the chaos his orders had unleashed. For the first time, his defiance looked less like strength and more like isolation. Denzel, sensing the shift, lowered the papers but raised his voice with calm authority. This country doesn't belong to one man, no matter how powerful he thinks he is. It belongs to the mothers, the workers, the students, the people whose voices you tried to drown out. And today, their voices are louder than your armies. The gallery erupted again, cheers, applause, tears of relief. Outside, the crowd responded in unison, chanting Denzel's words back like scripture, "Louder than your armies." News outlets immediately clipped the moment, blasting it across social media. Within minutes, the hashtag louder than your armies trended worldwide, turning a courtroom exchange into a rallying cry for millions. Trump tried one last rebuttal, his hands gripping the desk, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. For the first time in years, he wasn't dictating the narrative, the people were. The ripple effect of Denzel's words reached far beyond the courthouse walls. Within hours, newsrooms across America had switched to non-stop coverage, replaying the moment again and again, the actor's calm yet forceful stance against Trump's show of military power. Anchors framed it as a turning point. This wasn't just a speech, it was a strike against authoritarianism in real time. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers were glued to their phones, watching the viral clip from their offices. Some silently cheered, others seethed, but none could deny that the ground had shifted. The phrase, "louder than your armies," appeared on protest banners, hand-painted signs, and trending feeds across the nation. In New York, Times Square's digital billboards lit up with images of the confrontation, turning the city into a cathedral of dissent. Across college campuses, students organized impromptu rallies, chanting Denzel's words as though they had always been part of American history. For a generation craving clarity and courage, it was the rallying cry they had been waiting for. Globally, the reaction was just as fierce. European newspapers praised the speech as an echo of democratic defiance, while activists in South America and Asia picked up the chant, using it against their own leaders. Even within the United Nations, whispers of America's domestic fracture spilled into formal debates. Meanwhile, Trump retreated into silence. Behind closed doors, his advisors scrambled to frame the moment as grandstanding and Hollywood theater. But leaked reports painted a different picture. Trump was livid, pacing, demanding loyalty tests, and lashing out at anyone who dared to suggest the tide was turning. The people, however, had already claimed the moment as their own. The courtroom scene was no longer about Trump or even Denzel, it was about millions of Americans realizing they weren't powerless. For once, the voices outside were louder than the commands inside, and the nation was beginning to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, the spiral of fear could be broken. And as night fell, the chant still echoed in the streets, carried by thousands of ordinary citizens, louder than your armies. Louder than your armies. By dawn, Trump's inner circle had devised a plan. If the courtroom moment had weakened his grip, then he would tighten it with force. That morning, federal agencies were directed to prepare statements justifying the guard deployments as necessary measures against chaos. Pro-Trump media flooded the airwaves, calling Denzel a radical actor playing politics. But as the official narrative tried to take hold, something unexpected happened. Americans didn't buy it. Instead of fear, people responded with fury. Protesters filled city centers from Chicago to Atlanta, hoisting placards that read, "We saw the truth. We won't unsee it." Trump, rattled, decided to escalate. That night, he stormed into a live press briefing, red-faced and fiery. He pounded the podium, claiming Denzel's speech had endangered national security. "No actor can tell me how to protect America," he bellowed, his voice cracking under the weight of his rage. And then, just as the world was watching, Denzel appeared on a split-screen broadcast. Calm, composed, and razor-sharp, he cut in with a rebuttal that stunned even the anchors. "Protecting America means protecting its people, not protecting your throne. You don't deploy soldiers against your citizens. You stand with them." The contrast was devastating. Trump's fury only amplified Denzel's poise. Hashtags like #ThroneVersusPeople and #StandWithThem began to trend within minutes. The entire country saw it for what it was, a clash not just between two men, but between fear and dignity, force and conscience. Leaked footage later showed Trump throwing papers, yelling at staffers, demanding they fix it. But nothing could undo the split-screen image now etched into America's collective memory. On one side, a leader unraveling, on the other, an actor embodying the courage millions longed for. For Trump, the counterattack backfired spectacularly. What was meant to crush dissent only magnified it. And for Denzel, it was no longer about Hollywood or politics, it was about standing as the voice of the silenced, and America was listening. The following week, the nation turned its eyes once again to the courthouse. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Trump marched in with his attorneys and a small army of aides, his expression fixed somewhere between fury and defiance. Across the aisle sat Denzel, composed, silent, his hands resting firmly on a stack of documents that had already become the stuff of legend. The judge's gavel struck. Order in the court. But order was impossible. Protesters outside shook the very walls with chants, "No soldiers on our streets. Stand with the people." The courtroom echoed with their roar, carried in through the marble halls. Trump's lawyer rose first, spitting fire about dangerous rhetoric and accusing Denzel of inciting unrest. Trump, unable to contain himself, leaned forward and shouted, "This man is destroying America with lies." His words ricocheted across the chamber like bullets. Then Denzel stood. He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. His voice cut through the air with chilling clarity. "What destroys America is fear. Fear you feed, fear you weaponize, fear you unleash against your own citizens. And when you send soldiers against peaceful people, that isn't leadership. That's tyranny." The room fell silent. Even Trump's supporters shifted uncomfortably. For a fleeting second, the mask slipped from Trump's face, his bluster giving way to a flash of panic. Cameras zoomed in, capturing his hand gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white, as if trying to anchor himself against the tide that was pulling him under. The judge tried to steer the trial back to legal arguments, but the battle had already outgrown the law. This was no longer a courtroom hearing, it was a theater of history, and everyone knew it. The people watching weren't waiting for verdicts, they were waiting for a moral reckoning. And in that moment, Denzel provided it. He lifted the documents once more, holding them high enough for every camera to catch. The truth is right here. You can threaten me, you can smear me, but you cannot bury this. Not anymore. The chants outside swelled louder, rattling the glass. Trump slammed his fist on the desk, his voice cracking, lies. All lies. But his fury sounded smaller now, drowned by the crowd's roar and the echo of Denzel's words that hung like a verdict no gavel could erase. America had witnessed the confrontation. And it was clear, this wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about survival, dignity, and who truly stood with the people. The streets outside the courthouse had become a living organism, shifting, pulsing, roaring with energy. Protesters filled every corner, their banners waving like storm clouds, their chants thundering through the city, "No to tyranny. Power to the people." What began as a crowd of hundreds had exploded into thousands, then tens of thousands, stretching across bridges and boulevards. News helicopters hovered overhead, capturing the spectacle. Across the country, Americans watched from living rooms, cafes, and phones at work. The footage was inescapable, citizens standing shoulder to shoulder, refusing to bow, refusing to be silenced. Inside the courthouse, Trump was visibly unraveling. His lawyers whispered frantically, shoving papers across the table, but his eyes kept darting toward the window as if the roar of the people outside was pounding directly into his chest. His hand trembled, clutching a glass of water, his once booming confidence cracked by the very movement he thought soldiers could suppress. Denzel, however, was immovable. He rose again, his calmness a stark contrast to the chaos. "This," he said, gesturing toward the sound outside, "is the voice of America. Not your armies. Not your staged rallies. Not your fear. These are the people you swore to serve, and you tried to silence them." The judge attempted to gavel down the rising tension, but it was useless. The trial had spilled beyond the walls. Screens across the nation broadcasted Denzel's words in real time. College students in California cheered. Factory workers in Detroit paused their shifts to listen. Farmers in Iowa stopped their tractors and leaned in closer to their radios. Then came the spark that lit the wildfire. A woman in the crowd outside unfurled a massive American flag painted with the words, "We are not soldiers in your war." The image went viral instantly, crashing servers with the sheer number of shares, tweets, and posts. By nightfall, protests had erupted in 20 states, each echoing the same message: enough was enough. Trump slammed the desk with his fist again, veins bulging in his forehead. "This is an insurrection," he shouted. But his words sounded hollow, desperate. Denzel didn't even look at him. Instead, he faced the cameras, steady as stone. "No. This is democracy. And you can't jail that. You can't silence that. And you damn sure can't deploy soldiers against it without history marking you as a tyrant." The courtroom erupted, not in chaos, but in an unmistakable shift. Journalists scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed like lightning. Even Trump's inner circle looked shaken, as though the ground beneath them was crumbling. For the first time, the balance of power tilted in plain sight. And America felt it morning, America was no longer the same. From New York to Los Angeles, massive marches clogged highways and city squares. Entire neighborhoods poured into the streets carrying handmade signs, "No more tyrants, our streets, our voice," and simply, "Denzel was right." News anchors spoke of a nationwide reckoning, their voices tinged with awe as they described the size and speed of the movement. Trump's inner circle, once a fortress of loyalty, began to splinter under the pressure. Governors in several states publicly refused to deploy their national guards, openly defying Trump's orders. In private conversations leaked to the press, even some of his closest allies admitted they feared the backlash would cost them their careers. "We can't hold this line," one senator whispered in a recording that went viral within hours. Meanwhile, Denzel became more than a witness, he became a symbol. His face, calm but resolute, appeared on posters, murals, and hashtags across social media. Students painted his quotes on school walls. Union workers chanted his words on picket lines. Even military veterans began speaking out, some saying, "We didn't serve this country for it to turn into a police state." Inside the courthouse, Trump's frustration boiled into panic. His rants grew wilder, his accusations more desperate. Fake news. Treason. Witch hunt, he barked, but the cameras caught something far more powerful than his words, his isolation. His aides avoided his gaze, his lawyers squabbled among themselves, and the once commanding figure looked like a man cornered by his own shadow. Denzel, however, spoke with precision and fire. He lifted another page of evidence, his voice steady. Every document, every order, every directive points to the same truth. This wasn't leadership. It was a siege against your own people. And the people have spoken, they will not kneel to tyranny. The crowd outside responded instantly, their chants rumbling like thunder, "We will not kneel. We will not kneel." The walls of the courthouse shook as if the very foundation of government was being rewritten in real time. That evening, footage of Denzel's testimony dominated every channel. Analysts declared the trial had shifted from a legal proceeding into a cultural turning point. "This isn't just about Trump anymore," one commentator said. "This is about whether America chooses fear, or freedom." And in every diner, subway, and living room across the country, people repeated the same words, "We will not kneel." The phrase was no longer just a chant, it was a battle cry. The courthouse was overflowing. Journalists crammed into every bench, their cameras aimed like weapons, ready to capture history. Outside, the chants of thousands surged like ocean waves, shaking the air with every syllable, "We will not kneel. We will not kneel." Trump entered the chamber with fire in his eyes, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked carved from stone. His lawyers trailed behind him, papers clutched in trembling hands. He slammed his palms against the defense table, glaring across the aisle at Denzel. "You've poisoned this country with lies," he shouted, his voice echoing like thunder. "You've turned the people against me." Denzel didn't flinch. He stood slowly, holding a thick folder of evidence. His voice, calm but unyielding, cut through Trump's fury. "No. You turned the people against yourself. You treated them as enemies instead of citizens, as pawns instead of people. Power is not a crown, Mr. Trump, it's a responsibility. And you failed it." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Trump's face flushed crimson as he pointed a trembling finger at Denzel. "You think you can stand here and lecture me? You're nothing. You're an actor." Denzel stepped forward, locking eyes with him, his voice rising like a storm. "I am a citizen. I am a voice for millions who refuse to be silenced. And in this room, the truth is louder than your fear." The judge's gavel cracked, but it was drowned out by the roar from outside. The chants grew louder, echoing through the marble halls, "Truth is louder. Truth is louder." Trump, shaking, slammed the table one last time. "This is my America," he roared. Denzel didn't hesitate. He raised the folder high for all to see, his final words slicing the silence like a blade, "No. This is our America. And we will not kneel to tyranny." The courtroom erupted. Journalists shouting, cameras flashing, the crowd outside exploding into cheers that rattled the city skyline. Trump's shoulders slumped, his fury collapsing into something smaller, weaker. For the first time, he looked less like a leader, and more like a man who had already lost. As the gavel fell, history was sealed. The people had chosen their voice, their truth, their defiance. And that voice, carried through Denzel's words, echoed across America, "We will not kneel." History will remember this moment, not for the rage of the powerful, but for the courage of the people. Denzel's words didn't just challenge Trump, they lit a fire across America. A fire that said, "We will not kneel, we will not surrender, and we will never be silenced. This is our America. And no tyrant can take that away."